And as I like to say, we always welcome joy.
Aw. Yeah, thank you for those introductions. I want another one or two or three. We'll
Who
stop
wrote
there.
those?
We'll stop there. I am so excited to be on the stage tonight with April and to have spent some time with her in the last couple of weeks. I want to start off by saying that when April and I were talking about giving this talk, I suggested at one point that maybe we give it a title, something like 5 Things You Never Knew About April Greiman. Because her work as an artist has been very expansive and exploratory. I mean, I feel like she freely and frequently crosses over between different fields. And so I thought 5 things you never knew about April Greiman would work, except that I'm here to promise you that you will learn more than 5 things about April Greiman. More than 5 things, and we decided to structure the talk a little differently because we wanted to introduce a few different bodies of work that she's been engaged in over the years. And we're going to start by showing one image, and you have the clicker.
Can you lower the lights? Andy, we got it all dialed in.
Yeah.
Perfect. We're going to start with a famous image, maybe the most famous image that April has made over the years.
Really?
Do you think?
I don't know.
Okay. Arguably, we'll debate it out.
It's a
but an
graphic design.
Yeah, an important poster that April made in 1987. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Called Pacific Wave, and if you go to LACMA, you could see it right now as part of their show, their survey Digital Witness, which is about the transformation of contemporary art in the hands of artists who are embracing, experimenting with soft digital editing tools, digital technologies. I said that Pacific Wave is part of Digital Witness. I should really say that Pacific Wave is the poster boy for Digital Witness. It's being used on all the marketing, all the promotion. You can Google Digital Witness at LACMA, and April's work is the first to come up. The curators say that it's a really early example of work made on the Apple Macintosh. Mm-hmm. And I thought we could start by talking about that. I think it's important not just that it was made on the Macintosh. So it was made in 1987, which would be 3 years after the Apple Mac was introduced. Not just that it was made on the computer, but that it is very honest or transparent about the texture. It gets the texture of the computer, communicates the texture in certain ways, a feeling. You get the limitations of the technology as well as the power of technology. And I thought we might start there, April. If you could talk a little bit about.
So far, I'm loving the conversation you're having with yourself.
Yes, it starts that way, but I want your voice more than anyone else.
Well, because there's a lot of work we're going to show, I don't want to dwell too much on it, but this poster, which was for an exhibition at the Fortuny Museum in Venice, Italy, it's a really simple concept which I try to explore in most work, like something really kind of, down to earth and simple that people could understand. So just briefly what this is, I don't know how many people have seen the movie Powers of 10 from the Eames. So you have to be a certain age, I guess, to know that. Only a few people raise their hands, and you're not old, Andrew. Sorry, so it's a very simple concept. There's a photograph of a wave you can see basically in the center, which then we digitized, and then you can't see it from here, but there's a little teeny black rectangle that has little pixels. So what I did was take a photo, digitized it, took a little pixel area and blew it up exponentially to be what looked like the giant snowballs. So it's just a very simple exercise in the kind of Pacific Wave being basically the electronic revolution or the digital revolution. coming from Pacific, particularly, it was all California artists in the show, and then just kind of riffs on that. And the beautiful thing, though, was printed in Italy. It's a large sheet poster, and I used day glow or fluorescent process ink. So if you've ever done, offset lithography, it really glows because it's special inks that are basically fluorescent, so it has metal in it. And they, of course, did a beautiful job printing it.
Can I ask you one more question about Pacific Wave and
Oh,
just
sure,
that,
sure.
the early
Sure.
early adoption of, because you had said the other week something about buying that first Apple computer, and you said you bought it at a department store, almost
Yeah.
like a toy.
Yeah.
And I just,
It's still kind of a toy, isn't it? Except
That's what I was
it's
wondering.
a difficult toy now.
Uh-huh.
And if it's working, that means it's not state of the art. Anyway, you'd have to be old to get that too. Okay.
Okay. And what department store was it,
Okay,
April?
so I went to the first TED conference, and I was a guest of one of the founders of TED, Harry Marks. And my husband and I were staying at Harry Marks' house, and he, on a Sunday morning after TED was over, he knocked on the door and said, "You have to come see this computer," in which case I said, I would never get out of bed on a Sunday morning to go see a computer. And so he said, "Yeah, you're going to go do this with me." So we went to Macy's department store. Again, you probably have to be pretty old to know about Macy's department store, right?
Macy's is still, they're still
There's
around.
still a few around. And so there were some people standing in front of this little beige box, and I got in line, and then after about an hour, the department manager came over and said, "Lady, you have to get off of this thing because there's like 100 people standing behind you," because I was just playing with it so much. So I bought one on the spot, which was in 1984. And I did buy it like it was like a toy. Like, I have a Polaroid camera, I should have this little thing. Never thinking it would be as profound a co-creator tool. Yeah, so that's my story. Should
Thank
we
you.
march
yeah,
on?
let's continue the story. Do you want to introduce this? How
Yeah,
many
this
of you
is,
recognize this? Maybe we should ask. Yeah, everyone's
wow.
seen it. Look at that.
Okay. This is what it looked like 17 years ago when it was first painted. And we have a representative here, Janice, has been trying for 5 years to get this redone because it's a digital video image. It was a result of shooting video, still photos day and night in the really bright new part of town, Koreatown. And it was also at the metro, the Wilshire, Vermont metro station. The plaza wasn't open, the train wasn't still going there, or running there, but I got commissioned by the developer to do these two walls. And so I shot video, and I proposed an image that was digital video. It was supposed to be digitally printed on vinyl and then adhered to the building. However, Cultural Affairs was having a big fight with lots of different city representatives that if something is on vinyl, it's commercial, it's a billboard. So they were against that, or they were having to fight that. There was no logo on it. It was just an image, a video image. And then, so we were kind of moving along that it might get printed and adhered, and then the fire department decided that even if it was adhered, that they didn't like the warranty on the adhesive, and so there was a battle over that. And then they actually said I couldn't print it on vinyl and adhere it to the building. At which point, the art consultant who brought me in, Mary Norris, some of you might know her, said, "Well, I think you should quit the commission and just let them find somebody else." But it's 8,200 square feet, and I was not going to let go of probably the biggest size commission that I would ever get in my career. And so I interviewed and then hired two mural painters. And we had to revamp the image because you can't get 16,000 colors like you would in video if you printed it. And so it came down to about 100 colors of paint. So there's more to that story. But anyway, with Janice here, thank you for coming, Janice. We now have a realistic bid to actually print it on vinyl, and not on vinyl, on another kind of material that's more hip and thinner, but it's an adhesive substrate. And so hopefully, I don't know, Janice, how's this going? Okay, great.
No, I mean, I think we could see just from the number of hands here that this work of yours is a landmark, and it's also used for wayfinding in a way. You know, I mean, I think about all of the public art in LA that you used to help you figure out where you are. You know what?
There's also a nice part of the Metro system, which they did, you know, art for Metro. Hi, John.
Mm-hmm. And the scale, I mean, it's enormous. So
Yeah.
it's one thing that I've noticed about your work, and you talked about as well, is that you work at
Different scales.
extraordinarily different scales. I mean, from the most, well, starting with that Apple Mac screen, which is minuscule, to working at an architectural scale. And also working in the community then, or trying to find an image that resonates with the community.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel good about the image,
It's a great image.
which I named Hand Holding a Bowl of Rice, because it was contextualized to the actual site. At that time, you know, driving around and walking around at day and night, shooting video and still photos, it really did represent symbolically hand holding a bowl of rice and the kind of feeling of a you know, up and rising part of Los Angeles, and kind of the vibrancy and the welcoming feeling of a new area of town that was kind of gussing up.
I was going to say that it's remarkably warm. That I've written about a lot of public art before, and that there's a warmth to this piece. You know, the humanity. Maybe it's the hand that gives it that. But that you chose such an important. Did you consider any other images for this space, for this piece?
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I tried to keep it, I mean, there's no rice in the bowl. You know, it's just a gesture, and it's named that. But I also was interested because in researching what I could use symbolically, rice is the most, you know, overwhelmingly largest amount of grain eaten in the world. And so for me, it represented also abundance.
Well, maybe this marks the beginning of LA as a great food city, in which we've seen the
Korean
transformation.
food.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Do we want to go to the next slide?
Sure.
Slide, I say. Next image.
I'm just throwing this in here. Actually, any of the projects in architecture, color and materials palettes, and other things with buildings, the architect is here, Michael Rotondi of Roto Architects. So this is a work in progress. This is a building that hasn't started construction, but it's the Belmont Pool and Aquatic Center in Long Beach. And what you're looking at here is a detail of one of the murals I'm doing. It's a glass, dichroic glass mural. And this will be a printed image of this waveform, which we created. And this is just a singular glass wall that's as you enter through the building to the children's pool.
Can you give us a rough idea of timing, April, when we'd be able to see this?
Mike, do you want to try to?
Probably 2 years from now.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then I can kind of just go through some of these, but these are, I have a fairly extensive body of work and color and materials palettes for the built environment. Again, any of these buildings you will see are Roto Architects. So this is Warehouse C in Nagasaki Harbor. This is when I work on color palettes, I always work conceptually. So it's not just trendy colors. each one of these projects has most of them will have a story or narrative that I used and developed in working with the client. This is the oldest accredited Native American university in the US. It's in South Dakota, Sintigleska University. Also a really interesting cosmology and narrative that goes with the development of a color palette for the Lakota Sioux.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? What fed this particular color palette?
In a nutshell, their cosmology has to do with, of course, seasonal rituals, but definitely based on numerology and associating colors with the 4 directions. So, it's based heavily on numerology and the seasons, and yeah. So the great thing was, in a way, there was a lot of freedom for me because prior to this, they were having the university in containers, so everybody was, classes were being held in just these container boxes. So when I came back with the palette, you don't get to paint, a kick-ass wall like that in red in too many places, and almost 30 years ago, right? Yeah. And I did yellow linoleum floors, and it wraps around, and then, so anyway. And this, I'm showing Madame Tussaud. Roto Architects did the exterior of the building. Well, they did the building, but it is a wax museum, so museum architects did the interior. But why I'm showing this is it's not such a rich narrative as working with Native Americans, but I'm also a material freak. I've always really liked exploring not only scale change, but dealing with different materials, natural materials. So in this case, Madame Tussaud, Roto picked, there are 2 main materials. There's the zinc, which is what looks pink and sparkly there, or it looks white actually. And on the side of the building, there's concrete, well, they're called CMUs, concrete, what's M for? Concrete material units or something. What is it? What's a CMU? It's just called, it's like a concrete block, but I stained that black. But the color on the zinc is just kind of a metal kind of gray, right? But I proposed putting a certain stain on it so that as the sun changed, as the sunset started to happen, that affected the color to make it pink, looking like the rest of the sunset. And on the and the palette does have a reference to the Chinese theater, which is right next door. So it's like the complementary color palette to the Chinese theater next door. And then this is was a fun project at Pacoima Neighborhood City Hall in Pacoima, where I just worked on the color of stains, and we did actually the signage package and some other things on the interior, but usually not.
I mean, it's so clear that you're a colorist in some ways. Do you think of yourself that way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I found out the word colorist means like people that work in salons that do your color.
Okay, you're not that kind of colorist.
Well, I'm kind of working towards it, it's like, should I put go back the slide so that we could talk some more, or should we just go into the...
Leave it there for a second, because
Okay.
I just wanted to throw out a kind of a random question about color.
But if they're taping, probably we should have, oh no.
That's okay.
No, I don't want to do that.
Leave it where it is? Yeah. Is there any color that you refuse to work with?
There used to be, but not anymore.
Mm-hmm. What was the color? What came to mind when I said that?
I think it was a range of browns,
Uh-huh.
because I felt like they were too absorbent. They didn't give much back, but then I totally got into different browns. Like there's a color that I call Anubis, which is the Egyptian character that escorts the dead to the next life. And it's like a dog. It looks like a dog, very pointy nose, but the color of that dog is the darkest brown you could find. It's almost black, but if you really look at it, give it some time, it's very brown.
Mm-hmm.
So that changed my opinion. I actually used that color also in a residential project of Roto Architects,
Yeah, I was
where I
wondering.
painted a whole mast that's lifted off the floor. That's the media room in the Carlson Regis house, a residence, and I nearly got fired from the job because the client came back to find out that one of the main space hanging suspended in the main living room was this nearly black color form, but that's a whole other story too. Pretty great client in the end.
The one other thing I just wanted to ask you about in this respect is what you talked about before, seeing color, sometimes more acutely.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Oraglows?
Yeah. Could you
I
describe
don't want to
that?
spook them out.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. This is super cool. It's like a
Okay,
superpower,
so,
basically. April Greiman has a superpower, and you're about to find out what it is.
I have a couple, actually.
Okay,
Couple
go.
superpowers, which I guess is one of them is a synesthesia. Like I always
gonna
like
ask that too.
typography because when I am working with type, I hear sound. But if that didn't creep you out enough,
Go for it.
So like the Northern Lights, the Aurora Borealis, which is basically what's known as plasma or gas that's in our atmosphere, and it gets charged and it glows, right? It's like this swirly thing. But there's something called air glow too. And air glow is something you can see in daytime, and it's when the electrons are, I don't know if it's electrons actually, the atomic material gets a charge from the sun, but also from the earth. And it's hard to see, but if you have a pretty flat landscape, you can actually see, it's a bit like a rainbow, but it's not quite like a rainbow color, not that orderly, but it's like you can see a glow of color, and it's called air glow. And it's a phenomenon. Can you see it, Andy? Oh.
But you will
Can
all
anybody- has
go home
everybody
and
ever
look
seen
for
that?
it.
So
It's a
I
daytime
did some
phenomenon.
photographs that I call air glow, and I didn't include it.
Okay. Still, I think it's a superpower. I would like
I
to
got you
have.
convinced. Huh?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Good. Do you want to start looking at the photographs
Yeah.
then? We can
Uh-oh,
go to the next
I'm trying.
image.
So this is a fairly recent bunch of photos. I call them photographic paintings. They are photographs. They're sourced from photography. And then, of course, I used my computer to enhance or kind of remind myself of what I remember in my mind's eye from that experience, because actually the lens of the eye is probably one of the most sophisticated tools, but when you go through a couple of other technologies or tools, it has to make some decisions in representation. So I can remember pretty well what the original color is when I'm taking photos. And so anyway, here's a selection of them. Mostly,
So you're saying that the adjustment of the color is to match the original as you experienced it, as you
yes,
perceived
and
it.
in that regard, I call it a painting.
Mhm. extraordinary.
And the smallest of the images would be about 4 feet, 40 inches. I work very large, and I have my own commercial digital printer at my studio.
Yeah, the quality of the prints is extraordinary. So, I love that.
This was in a show at the Brand Library, and it's pretty big, and I can't tell you how many kids and adults kept trying to press the,
So funny.
like, it was so cute.
But I also love the way it's framed, kind of like a Mondrian painting. You get some sense of abstract painting there. Do you want to talk about your
Sure.
sources?
Okay, so there's a couple of things going on here, themes or observations or interest. I am very big on shooting a zillion photos of landscape. I'm also really interested in kind of the contrast between the abstract form and the pictorial or realistic landscape. I got very interested in the forms of Jean Arp, the painter, artist. And so I'm kind of repurposing them and recoloring them to kind of float through the environment.
And this is ARP as well.
This is several photographs. There's another theme, which is objects in space, and I'm really interested in capturing or having various size objects articulate space.
There, that's my favorite.
This is having an assistant who's fluent in some of the CAD programs, like Maya and Rhino and all these things. So we've been exploring dimensionalizing Jean Arp forms. So, yeah, although sadly, he just calls this the bean. kind of a dumbing down of, some of my great efforts to do some high art.
When we're thinking about your landscapes, so many of your landscapes are rooted in the desert, in this sense of place. And I know that you have a history in the desert as well, but maybe not everyone knows that. Can you talk a little bit about why the desert, and what has led you to the desert in your life and in your work?
I accidentally moved to Los Angeles from New York because I discovered the desert, and I came out from New York to work on a project because I wanted to leave the place I was working at the time. And I was also a little bit fed up with, it's a whole other subject.
So you hadn't lived here at all at this point?
No.
You were a New Yorker?
Wouldn't dream of living in Los Angeles, being a snobby New Yorker. But so I got hired to work on a project, and I came out to work on that project, and then I hired a photographer, Jamie Odgers, and you guys can come on down. There's plenty of seats. Come on. And so I hired him to work on an ad campaign, and he decided, and he had shot lots of things in the desert, and he decided that we would do one of the photo shoots in the desert. And so I had no interest in going to the desert because I thought, well, there's no color there, and it's just, I'm going to be thirsty all the time, and whatever. But
too brown.
So, and so of course, he takes me to what Michael and I call the big desert, which is Death Valley. Not that Monument Valley isn't also a really big desert, and other deserts of the West. But and then after that, Jamie and I I got fired from my job because instead of being out shooting for a day, we were like gone for like a week. and we did start a little romance, but, and so my boss in Century City fired me because he was afraid I'd go into business with Jamie, which is exactly what he forced me to do because I had no contacts or anything. So, and that's part of why I ended up staying. But I just became literally mesmerized and kind of psychologically and emotionally kind of acclimated to that environment, which brought me like peace of mind.
Yeah. I mean, when I moved here from New York, I moved to LA 20 years ago. You know, immediately you can plug into this conversation, New York versus LA, LA versus New York in the art world. But to me, the real opposite of New York would be the desert.
Yeah.
It's not LA. LA is its own city with its own character and own.
And I think I discovered color in the desert, which was the irony of thinking it was sand and kind of dried plant material. And the color that you do see are so extreme, you know, and so saturated because, you know, the plants that survive there, you know, to bloom or flower has to take an enormous amount of energy, right? And yeah, so.
And then you've lived in the desert over the years.
No, I've never lived in the desert. That's another story, like owning a motel
Yes.
and spa in the.
Remotely then, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, where was it?
In Desert Hot Springs. You're really digging on all this personal stuff.
Well,
you know?
yeah.
We didn't
yeah.
discuss this.
Okay, we won't go so personal for the next question. But but you have this connection, like a lived connection to the desert.
Yeah.
And then it shows up really throughout your work.
Yes.
I mean, over the years. It's
Yes.
not just one body of work about the desert. The desert is a background,
Well, that's where you can, you know, there's just vastness of space, right? And that's where you can see air glow
great.
if you want to.
I will go.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's interesting because I can be kind of a heady person. But my body, I felt grounded. It felt like my body said, this is home, this environment. And so living in LA certainly is not feeling like, other than when the wind's blowing, you get a lot of sand kind of blowing around or dust, or silica. But I do know that I can have my feet in the sand in 20 minutes, you know.
Yeah.
So.
I love that this image is up still so that we can
yeah.
see. It is an image about grounding in a way. Okay. And what can you tell us about this work? Did you use
it's
AI
flaming.
for this work, April? We haven't talked about AI yet. Did you use AI for this work?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I think.
Okay, the other thing about my using AI in defense of my using AI is that I use my own source material. So I don't feel guilty about like surfing and finding somebody else's stuff. But we've downloaded, I don't know how many images for specific kinds of plant material, landscape, other objects to be resource material for my work.
And you use programs like Midjourney or.
Yeah, Firefly, all of them, I forget, there's a lot of them.
But trained on your own images for ethical reasons, you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that we started the conversation about AI with a defense of your practice of AI. And it's, because the use of AI is so controversial and among artists who I think are rightfully concerned that other artists are being exploited.
Yeah.
Or
I do have a funny story about using chat, though, for the first time. Not the first time, but just I was aware of it. I may have looked at some things, but I was having to write a little piece or maybe part of a bio. And I have a fair amount of content to, work with, but I decided, so I went on chat and I took in a couple paragraphs talking about my transmedia work or whatever that I just cobbled together, just writing. And you have to say, I'm an artist and then it came out with such garbage. On my journey, it was just this stuff that made me like, feel nauseous. It was so bad. So then I was like, well, this is stupid. Why would anybody use this? Then I said, I'm going to say I'm a physicist. So it's like, it is kind of garbage in, garbage out. Like you have to still start to look at things in a different way and think about how you can, not trick it, but how you can train it or how you can mold it to be something more interesting. So as a physicist, my bio was fabulous. It's like the transmedia and some of the terms I use, were way better.
That's great.
As it fed it back out to me. And I didn't use it in its entirety, but it was really helpful to smooth out the kinks in a written piece.
And I've done similar experiments over the last year or two. And as a journalist, maybe I'm somewhere in the middle. But I like this moment in time that we're in where there's still hallucinations and they're kind of visible. That ChatGPT gave me a Pulitzer Prize. I'm like, who can say no to that? I mean, literally in my bio, 75% of it was completely accurate and drawn from bios that are out there because of talks I give like this. And then it gave me a Pulitzer. So, gotta love it. Okay, do we want to go on?
Did you get any money?
No, nothing. That's the real challenge, right? As
How
journalism.
do we get the money? As
Yeah. But that's another talk for another time.
So this is, oh boy, it's a lot of stuff. This is a real photograph as the main image, taken while I'm driving safely. But this is another little subset of forms we're working with in formal studies, which is what are called primitives. So it's a triangle, a circle, and a square, or a pyramid, a sphere, and a cube. So these are now, this abstract and kind of primitive formal language is now intersecting the literal image taken while driving. And then I just decided I wanted to scribble all over the place.
I like the scribbles. You have one more from this series?
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at that.
So that one was called The Beginning of Time, and this one is called The End of Time. And again, they're pretty big size, printed on Hahnemuhle paper with archival pigment inks. So if you see them when they're not glazed, it's almost like they're silk screened. The richness of these inks is just awesome. Oh, wow, we got to keep going here.
Yeah, so I mentioned, I'll jump in for just for a second, that I mentioned April's work in the LACMA show, Digital Witness. Pacific Wave is in the show. Oh, we're going backwards?
Because he's shooting, so if he's recording us, it's good if we have light.
Okay, great.
But I'm going to go on.
Okay, wonderful. So when we move ahead, what you will see is another work that is in the LACMA show. Also, instead of a poster child of the show, you could call it a centerpiece of the show because it is literally in a very central gallery in the center, taking up a lot of space. Originally, you designed it for Design Quarterly.
Yes.
Made this piece for Design Quarterly where it was a fold-out. Can you describe the format originally?
Yeah, so the piece is called, it was part of a quarterly magazine, I guess, or journal from the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis. Called Design Quarterly, and I got invited to do my own issue of that. And I just looked at if I wanted to do a magazine if I was showing work, it would have to be retrospective because anything I could publish then would have had to been done in the past. And so I just decided, who wants to see that old stuff again? A lot of it had been published in magazines. So I decided to take the author's fee and buy a new piece of hardware. So I got this. I also had been shooting video using professional equipment before I got involved with computers. So I had my own professional equipment. And Apple came out with a little tiny, it looked like a CD player kind of thing, but you could cable in your video and take a cable out to your Mac. And so I ended up doing a video piece, which at that time there was not any way to get color through Macintosh. It was still black and white. At that time, there was only a dot matrix printer. I forget what they're called. Whatever, dot matrix printer. There's a laser writer, it was called.
Wow.
And obviously very low resolution. So I did a portrait of myself and then kind of electronically collaged different words and content and other images into this. And I ended up making this piece life-size, like the size of my actual size at the time. I was 2 inches taller at that age. But the thing was, like, you couldn't print it out. You had to print it out on like 8.5, 11 sheets of paper. So it came out like sheet by sheet. So it was, in a sense, tiled. And so the piece was designed on the little Mac screen, like 512 or 520, I can't remember. It was the second Mac that came out. So I'm looking at this 6-foot-long final print size at a screen size like this. So that's a whole other story. But the piece then folds down, and then the curator of the Walker said, we can't just have this because it's a magazine it's a journal that goes on shelves in libraries. So I designed a slipcase. And so it comes in a slipcase, but it folds out to 2 by 6 feet.
So that's,
You'll see it.
Yeah,
And
that's
then,
the first edition.
Yeah, so
the
that
first
was in
version of the work,
1986. It is a portrait of me, and well, I don't want to talk about this, my psychological and emotional issues of the time, but
Well, why don't we show them?
yeah. So then, in the last 5 years, I've been working with a collaborator in London, Dale Herrickstad, and his team, including somebody in LA, Jackie Turpin, and we've worked on developing this as an augmented reality, and it's an installation at LACMA. And I did bring this, like, we did a half-size printed piece, and my husband has his tablet, but you can use on the phone, and after this is over, if you want to just see how it functions. And so it's a half-size representation of the original 2 by 6. And yeah, so here we go. And so the original one was called Does It Make Sense? And this one is called Design Quarterly. So this is called Alt DQ.
Yeah.
So this is
Let's see if it, oh,
the gallery that it's in at LACMA.
it's working. So after you scan the QR code, the work comes to life in a way.
You'll see that in the second video.
Wonderful.
So it has a free app, which was developed by Isovist. This piece will have sound. It's really interesting working with apps, which I've not done, but if you change the littlest thing, you have to get it reapproved. So adding sound is a component. There'll be my narrating 2 dreams and 2 introductory pieces that are printed on this. The also interesting kind of evolution of technology is that this piece is directly printed inkjet right on Dibond metal. So, and it's very high quality, and the color is perfect. So this would be the state of the art now. Does it make sense in this show with the augmentation? I'll show you in a second.
Yeah, let's see.
So if you go to the show, there's a QR code on the platform, and you just shoot that, download the app. Takes no time at all.
Isn't it beautiful? It's really powerful. I feel like I'm seeing a lot more, so many artists embracing AR in a way, fewer doing VR. But this is one of the more effective uses of AR that I've seen.
So if you do go see it, or if you these are available through my studio. If you want to contact, go through my website. But it's best to view it through a tablet, because you could just read more or see more in one a bigger screen size, right?
I mean, what I love that this work, this is your first AR work, correct? Is that right?
Yes.
April? I love that you've gone to AR for this work because I feel like the work had the germ. From the beginning, this work was about the body and our moving, the way that when we interact with a work of art, we don't interact just as a kind of a brain receiving and sending a signal. I mean, we have full body experiences of art. And then you put, you know, I also think of this as April's most feminist, kind of fiercely feminist work because she put her body in it. She put her naked body in it. Do you consider it a feminist work?
Sure.
And for you, can you talk a little bit about why you made that move at that time? Because not all of your work has that kind of explicitness, to be honest, or directness, personal presence, I should say.
Prior to this, I had already pretty much a large body of graphic design work that had been published and client-based. And when I got a Macintosh, anything I did in the early exploration days, the male-dominated graphic design community, particularly in New York, just bashed me. They just said, it's crap, this is not design, you're an artist, you know, you should get the hell out of the field, literally. See if you're in business in 5 years. And I was suffering quite a bit, being in my 20s, you know, actually I was in my early 30s, but so one, somebody encouraged me to, as a creative person, to just, what else okay, if you're gonna be suffering from this and keep questioning if you're a graphic designer or if you're an artist, you know, this kind of the voice in your head going crazy. To pursue something I also was interested in. So I was always interested in shooting video, so I did get my own equipment and I learned how to use an analog computer at the time and a music synthesizer. And so it emboldened me to switch it off, that dialogue, which didn't belong to me, but was some old men who were feeling the competition or feeling threatened. And I thought, you know, if they say my work's too personal, even as a graphic designer, then I basically said I'd give them double barrels. If you think what my do is personal, then, you know, like take this, you know, as a, you know, here I am.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, I will just use my body in space to contextualize the things I think about and some of my humor and the bigger questions like where did I come from, you know, where am I in the universe, in the big picture, you know, what's important, what has meaning that I do and make, and so, yeah.
I think that comes through, and I hope you all get the chance to experience it. So just to finish up our conversation, and then we will open it up for Q&A, you wanted to show a few videos.
Yeah. So over the last few years, I've also been finally getting the time and the experience to use some of the movie programs. And so here we go, let's see. So there's 3 of them that we've completed. that be it?